de la visualisation de données pour jeu. Aujourd'hui, on essaie quelque chose de spécial, donc on va se planter. On appelle ça le démo effect dans la Silicon Valley. On essaie d'avoir un conférencier qui est à San Francisco. D'abord, on va voir s'il est là. Mais, donc, je vais vous le présenter. Je vais vous le présenter en anglais, un instant. On va installer le son ici. OK, hey, salut Yann. Je vais te montrer les gens. I will show you the crowd.
All right.
Hey.
All right.
Okay, so I will mute myself on my side, and yeah, you're on the big screen.
Okay, so I think everyone can see the slide. I will begin. So yeah, my name is Ian Johnson, as Chris said, and Chris also helped organize a lot of the Bay Area meetups when he used to live in San Francisco. Just a tiny bit about myself before we get into it. I studied math and scientific computing in school, but when I came out to Silicon Valley, I joined some startups and learned about web-based data visualization, and that eventually landed me here at Google, where I'm a UX engineer, which is basically like a prototyper, and I do a lot of data visualization prototypes. And as Chris mentioned, I help organize the D3 meetup and the Unconference, which is a yearly gathering of about 100 dataviz practitioners. And we just had our fourth event about a month ago. So one of the things I think that is sort of core to the D3 community, as well as the practice for a lot of people who make visualizations with D3, is the power of examples. And some of that is illustrated in a really amazing essay. It's an interactive essay by Mike Bostock. If you haven't seen this, I highly encourage you to check it out. I'll make sure that we can email these slides out to everybody and check out the links afterwards. But in this essay, Mike, the creator of D3, sort of outlines many ways in which examples can be useful in developing your own visualizations. If you're trying to do a complex visualization for a bigger project, breaking up the techniques into smaller pieces. And I'll just open it briefly so you get a visual sense for what you might get. I'll just scroll through. We don't have to worry about exactly what he's explaining here, except for that it's a very compelling case for making your own examples, as well as making examples for others. And I think that's what we'll get into next here, is Mike also created this website called Blocks, blocks.org, which is a canonical way for people to share examples in the community. And what you get when you make a block is sort of the visual output of the visualization. You're able to specify sort of a description below that, and then it shows the code that was used to make the example. And sort of traditionally, these examples don't go longer than 100 or 200 lines of code, and there's ways to pack multiple files in and do more fancy stuff, but a lot of the time the sort of beauty and utility of it is that, in only 100 lines of code, you could learn how to make one of these stream graphs, or you could copy the example and make it your own. So the one thing was, it used to be pretty hard to make a block. Like you had to use the command line, GitHub, and all these other things that people who are trying to make these visualizations aren't necessarily skilled at. Right? People come from all different backgrounds to make data visualization. It might be design, or data analysis, business intelligence, and it could be software engineering. But there's a lot of people that want to do this stuff, and you don't always want to get down the command line to do it. So I made this tool called Block Builder as a Kickstarter project. Actually, it's open source, and it's sort of an interface for editing blocks. And you can check it out later, but basically, again, you get sort of the place to view your visualization, as well as a place to edit the code. So once we had that, we had a lot of people making new blocks and editing other people's, like forking and sharing. We needed a way to see and find all these examples. There's so many. There's kind of hard to navigate. So we built this block builder search tool, which indexes, it's now I think got over 27,000 examples from thousands of different people across the internet. And you can just kind of search for anything. Maps, timeline, anything you think of. There's at least a few examples for most of the common visualizations, and there's a lot of visualizations that you may have never heard of or seen. And again, I'll just kind of open this real quick to show you what it looks like. So you get here and you see, this is just all the latest examples people are playing with, making. And you can also limit it to only ones with thumbnail images. Not everyone takes the time to add a thumbnail if they're experimenting. And you can search by username, so you can look at like all of Mike Bostock's blogs, which are pretty awesome. But then you might want to see all the force layouts stuff that he's made, anything that mentions force. Yeah, so I encourage you to check that out. There's also, if you use a little bit of D3, and there's a couple of versions. The latest version is not necessarily compatible with the version 3. So sometimes it's helpful to be able to find examples in a particular version depending on which one you're using. So, as I mentioned, there's a lot of examples out there. There's all kinds of people doing this stuff. It's a pretty big ecosystem. And not only that, building things in D3 can be kind of overwhelming because of the number of things, technologies, and concepts and principles you might want to learn. There's a whole class of like programming and tooling kind of stuff. There's like some mathematics and graphics stuff, design, interaction design, visual design, Gestalt principles, right? There's also data thinking and analysis. So there's all these different things. It can, depending on where you're coming from too, like maybe you're strong at web programming, but you've never done much data stuff or design stuff, or I know many designers who came in sort of really strong in design but haven't done much programming. Because in the Bay Area we've like hosted a lot of workshops and meetups, I've gotten the chance to meet a lot of people who are new to this. And I ended up writing a post called The Hitchhiker's Guide to D3. We're kind of trying to map out the space and give some good starting points to help people get oriented and get started. So I encourage you to check that out at some point. And let's see, so you can just kind of get a sense, talk about some of the concepts, talk about some of the tools, some of the places to start learning the actual API. But another, really central part of all this is the community. Because, and you may not be able to read this perfectly, it's actually at the end of that blog post, but to give a really short summary, we noticed that there's, a learning curve can look really steep when you're starting out. Especially if you don't know how to climb. And so a lot of times you pick up a book, right? And it's kind of like a ladder. A book is very rigid. It has a start and an end, and it will take you up the learning curve. But a lot of times there's other like new things you want to learn, and there's different learning curves. So people write tutorials, which are kind of like a rope someone has like let down for you to climb up. It's a little harder to climb. You have to use more muscles to climb up, but you can still get there. And then finally, I think something pretty unique to the D3 community is the number of examples, which sort of serve as little stepping stones. So it's even harder to use examples to learn tutorials, but there's a lot of them and they can take you to like interesting new territories. So if you kind of look at it like that, it may make what looks like a huge mountain to climb a little bit more accessible, right? Like there's multiple ways that you can tackle it. Another thing to keep in mind is especially when dealing with like so many technical skills to pick up and potential technologies and always changing all the time. It's look at how other people who are really good at this stuff learned. And so I interviewed these 4 designers and data visualizers. They all spoke at VisMTL, which is one of the most awesome visualization conferences, at least in the States. And one common thing that stood out is that they all sort of set goals for themselves, and they chose projects, and then they learned how to do what they wanted to do, rather than start with like, what technology should I learn? They just realized like, oh, actually I have to like learn more about some of this D3 stuff, or I have to learn more Canvas, or whatever it may have been. And it's interesting because they all have different backgrounds. Tony comes from interaction design, Zan's she was a data analyst before she learned D3. Shirley is a software engineer, and Nadia, she's, well, a bit of everything. So, you can come from anywhere and really do some cool stuff. Another thing that I think is really interesting and that you can look out for and can be really helpful when you're trying to learn how to do this stuff is the Data Sketches website from Nadia and Shirley, where they actually document their process for building a visualization. And I mean, in extreme detail, everything from collecting the data, sketching on pencil and paper, and trying out ideas in code. It really shows you that none of these like beautiful, amazing visualizations started out that way. Like, they all start out as really rough concepts of, some pretty hard work, right? Like looking through and mashing up data sets, and not very glamorous, but important nonetheless. So I really recommend checking out their website, because it's already got 20 amazing visualizations on it, but as well as these like powerful stories. I also just want to mention that great data can be hard to find. If you're lucky enough to work at a company where they serve it up to you, that's awesome. But I like to point people to this Data is Plural newsletter. Every week they send out, I think it's Jeremy Singer, he's an editor at BuzzFeed, I want to say, and he curates like 3 data sets or so that are really programmatically accessible. They have a nice description, and you can see an archive of all the past ones. So it's like a nice, so if you're looking for a project and you need some good data to use, that's great. I also want to shout out a project I worked on at Google, which is this quick draw data set, where we have 50 million doodles that people drew as part of this quick draw game. So if you ever want a whole lot of drawings to play with, there's tens to hundreds of thousands of drawings of cats or any one of these words like bat or ball or bird. So it's pretty fun. Finally, there's a lot of online places that you can be part of this community and learn and connect and share. And I think that's one of like the great things about the D3 community too, just how positive and welcoming people are. The Slack channel that has over 2,500 people, it's a great place to get help and have design conversations or technical conversations, and share work and also even coordinate with folks that you may have met tonight. You could have a Montreal channel and stay in touch. The D3 mailing list is a great place. Like, a lot of the help requests have moved a little more towards like Stack Overflow or the Slack channel, but you can have some deeper conversations here, and a lot of people pay attention to this mailing list, so it's a great resource. And finally, on Twitter, is a great place to follow people. For some reason, a lot of people making cool data visualizations like to tweet about it in particular. So I personally use it to stay in touch and kind of see what stuff is coming out, and I'd encourage you to as well. So that's actually my presentation. Thank you.
just take a moment to realize that we have like one of the biggest community organizer in the D3 community, so it's also the datavis community around and live from San Francisco. So I think another round of applause. Get back to work now.